18 years ago, Ben Caldwell's life shattered when his young daughter, Emily, vanished without a trace. He rebuilt his life, but never stopped hoping. Then, on a chance shopping trip, he spots a young woman wearing a necklace identical to the one he gave Emily just days before she disappeared. Could this stranger be his daughter? And if so, where has she been all these years? And why was she taken? As Ben digs deeper, he's drawn into a world of hidden secrets and heart-wrenching revelations, forcing him to confront truths about his own family he never saw coming. This is a story of redemption, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family. If you love stories of mystery, family, and second chances, subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to comment below. What would you do if a long-lost loved one suddenly reappeared? Now let's begin Echoes of Emily. Ben Caldwell pushed open the heavy glass doors of Manhattan's most exclusive jewelry boutique, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor in quiet defiance of the shop's museum-like silence. Around him, a muted display of wealth glittered under soft golden lights, each display case more extravagant than the last. He didn't enjoy these places. Years had passed since he'd last indulged in this kind of shopping, but today he was here with a mission: to buy something for his wife, Karen. She'd mentioned the boutique several times, her hints lingering at the edges of conversations. They'd been married for 8 years, and she had stood by him through everything. The good and the bad. The very bad, he thought, feeling the familiar pang of sorrow twist in his chest. As he stepped farther in, Ben noticed a young woman with short auburn hair standing behind the glass counter, meticulously organizing a set of emerald pendants. Her head was bent in concentration, her slender fingers moving carefully, almost tenderly, as if the jewelry pieces were precious artifacts rather than luxury items for the wealthy. For a moment he froze, his mind jolting back nearly 2 decades. Emily, his daughter, whose laugh had once filled every corner of their old house, and who had vanished just before her 8th birthday. She would have been a young woman by now, not much older than the saleswoman before him. "Get a grip, Ben," he reminded himself, closing his eyes briefly to regain control. "You're here for Karen." He took a steadying breath, focusing on the task at hand. As he moved closer to the counter, the saleswoman looked up and smiled politely. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I help you with anything?" "Yes," he replied, trying to gather his thoughts. "I'm looking for something special." She tilted her head, considering his request. "A gift for someone close to you?" "Yes," he answered, his voice softer than intended. His eyes drifted to the pendant she wore, a delicate silver chain with a small, shimmering emerald at the center. The familiarity of it made his heart lurch. It was the same design, down to the detail, as the pendant he had once gifted to Emily for her 7th birthday. His daughter had worn it constantly, her small fingers often reaching up to touch the stone. Ben felt as if the world had suddenly slowed. He struggled to maintain his composure, but his gaze remained fixed on the pendant. Could it be? No, it's impossible. Just a coincidence. "Sir?" the young woman asked, bringing him back to the present. He cleared his throat, forcing a polite smile. "That pendant, it looks familiar. Where did you get it?" A brief look of surprise flashed across her face. Her hand moved instinctively to the pendant, her fingers grazing the emerald as if she'd never really noticed it before. "Oh, this?" she said, smiling. "It was a gift from my parents. I don't actually know where they got it." Ben's mind raced, his pulse quickening. It was absurd, the thought that his daughter might be standing here, yet the resemblance of the pendant was undeniable. "What are the odds?" he thought, his heart pulling him back to a hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "That's a beautiful piece," he managed to say, his voice strained. "It reminds me of one I gave to someone very special." The young woman offered him a kind, slightly puzzled smile before excusing herself to assist another customer. Ben watched her for a moment longer, feeling the haunting stir of memories he had tried to bury long ago. Outside the city bustled, the familiar hum of New York City life contrasting sharply with the hollow silence inside Ben's mind. He walked aimlessly, his thoughts consumed by the possibility that had bloomed within him, a possibility he knew was absurd, but one that refused to leave him. He found himself in Central Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the lake. The autumn leaves were just beginning to turn, their colors spilling over the water in vivid shades of gold and crimson. He used to bring Emily here when she was a toddler, pushing her on the swing, watching her giggle as she reached for the sky. She had been fearless, a little firecracker with her mother's spirit and his stubborn determination. Losing her had been like losing a part of himself, a wound that had never healed. The years after Emily's disappearance had been a blur of grief and self-blame. He and Claire, his first wife, had done everything they could. Private investigators, search parties, news appeals. But as months stretched into years and the trail went cold, Claire had withered under the weight of loss. They both had, but Claire was gone within a year, leaving Ben alone with his sorrow, haunted by the life they might have had together. And then he'd met Karen. She was warm, understanding, and patient. She knew his history, his pain, and yet she chose to stand by him, to help him find a way to live with the emptiness that had become a part of him. But even Karen, with her resilience and warmth, had grown frustrated over time. She wanted a whole husband, not a man perpetually caught between the past and present. Ben glanced down at his hands, feeling the weight of all he had lost and all he had tried to rebuild. But something about the saleswoman's pendant had stirred a part of him that had been dormant for years. Could it be Emily? Or am I just torturing myself? The next day, Ben found himself back at the jewelry store, his heart hammering in his chest as he pushed open the doors. He hadn't slept, his mind racing with the possibilities, the what-ifs that had haunted him for so long. The young saleswoman was there, moving gracefully between customers, her pendant catching the light with each movement. Ben waited until she was free, then approached her, his expression hesitant. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tight. "I was here yesterday, and I have a bit of an unusual question." The woman looked at him, her curiosity piqued. "Of course. What can I help you with?" Ben swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. "Do you know anything about your early life? Were you by any chance adopted?" A flicker of something passed across her face. Surprise, maybe. She glanced down at the pendant, her fingers brushing against it again, as if she hadn't even realized it was there. "Yes," she said softly. "I was adopted when I was 7. My parents told me I was found alone, wandering outside a small town upstate. I don't remember anything before that." Ben's heart pounded in his chest, his mind spinning with the implications of her words. 7 years old?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. She nodded, watching him carefully. "Yes. Why do you ask?" He struggled to find the right words, his emotions a whirlwind of hope, fear, and disbelief. I had a daughter who disappeared when she was 7. She wore a pendant just like yours." The young woman's eyes softened, a hint of sympathy in her gaze. "I'm sorry. That must have been incredibly hard." Ben nodded, his throat tight. "It was, and seeing that pendant, it's like seeing a ghost." The woman paused, then extended her hand. "My name is Julie." "Ben?" he replied, shaking her hand, feeling a strange connection in that brief touch. They agreed to meet for coffee after her shift, both feeling the weight of what they might discover together. That evening, as Ben returned home, he found Karen waiting for him, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. She had sensed the change in him over the past few days, the way he had drifted away emotionally. "Where were you?" she asked, her tone calm but probing. I met someone," he replied, his voice hesitant. "A young woman who reminds me of Emily. She was wearing the same pendant I gave Emily years ago, and I don't know, Karen. I can't ignore this feeling." Karen's face tightened, a mixture of disbelief and anger flashing across her features. "Ben, you promised me. You promised we'd move on. It's been 18 years. You can't keep chasing ghosts." "This isn't just a ghost," he insisted, his voice rising. "There's something about her, Karen. She was adopted, with no memory of her early life." What if she's our daughter?" Karen shook her head, her expression hardening. "And what if she's not?" "What then? Are you just going to keep hoping? Keep torturing yourself with every girl who looks like Emily?" The words stung, but Ben held his ground. "I have to know, Karen. I can't let this go." Not if there's a chance she might be out there. Karen's shoulders sagged, and for the first time he saw the pain beneath her anger. And what about me, Ben? What about us? Do we even exist in this picture of your life? The question hung heavily in the air, and Ben felt a pang of guilt. I'm sorry, Karen. I don't want to hurt you. But if there's a chance Emily is alive, I have to find out. She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes filling with tears she refused to shed. Then I hope you find what you're looking for, Ben, because I can't keep competing with a memory. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the quiet of the house they had tried to build together. Over the next week, Ben and Julie continued to meet, each encounter bringing them closer to an understanding neither had fully expected. They shared stories of their childhoods, Ben recalling the memories of Emily, and Julie sharing her fragmented recollections of her early years. One afternoon, as they walked along the river, Julie looked at him thoughtfully. If I am your daughter, what do you think happened to me? Ben sighed, his heart heavy. I don't know. I've wondered about it for years. I've imagined every possibility, from her running away to being taken. But nothing makes sense. Julie nodded, a hint of sadness in her eyes. I've always felt like something was missing. Like there was this big empty space inside me that I couldn't fill. They stopped at a park bench, sitting down together in the quiet of the late afternoon. Ben turned to her, his voice gentle. Would you consider taking a DNA test? Just to be sure? She hesitated, her gaze flickering with uncertainty. I think I would. I need to know too. Ben felt a rush of relief, tempered with the fear of what they might discover. He had spent so many years searching, so many years longing, and now the answer might finally be within reach. The days after Julie agreed to the DNA test stretched on, each one weighing on Ben like a leaden fog. He'd always believed that if he ever had a second chance with Emily, he'd know exactly what to do, exactly how to be the father she deserved. But now that the possibility was real, his heart was a storm of emotions. Hope, fear, even guilt. He continued to meet with Julie, their conversations an anchor in his life as he awaited the DNA results. He wanted to know every detail of her life, every corner of her personality that might mirror the little girl he had lost. And with each passing day, Julie too seemed to relax in his presence, her guarded demeanor softening. One afternoon, as they sat in a quiet cafe, she hesitated before asking, "What was she like?" "Emily?" Ben's heart tightened at the question. "She was incredible," he replied, his voice hushed. "Fearless, always laughing. She loved animals. Once she tried to adopt a stray cat without telling me or her mom. We had to keep it hidden for a week until she finally admitted what she'd done." Julie smiled, a faraway look in her eyes. "I always wanted a pet," she said softly. "Never had one, though. My parents, they thought it would be too much responsibility." He looked at her, the tenderness in his gaze barely concealed. "If you are Emily, we'll get you a whole zoo if that's what you want." She laughed, but it was a quiet, contemplative sound. They lapsed into a comfortable silence, both lost in thoughts of the life they might share. Back at home, Karen's patience was wearing thin. She'd noticed the changes in Ben, how distracted he'd become, how he seemed to live in another world altogether. They rarely had dinner together anymore, and even when they did, his mind was clearly elsewhere. One evening, after yet another dinner in silence, she finally broke. "Ben, this can't keep going on. You're obsessed." Ben looked up from his untouched plate, his gaze unfocused. "Karen, I can't ignore this. Julie could be Emily. You know what that would mean to me." Karen sighed, running a hand through her hair. "But what about me, Ben? What about our marriage? I've spent years supporting you through this. I've been there for you, even when you couldn't fully be there for me. And now, it feels like I'm the one who doesn't exist." He set down his fork, leaning forward. "Karen, please try to understand. If this is real, if she's really my daughter, then I have to know. I have to give her the life she should have had." Her face softened, a hint of the hurt beneath her anger showing. "And what about the life we're supposed to have? Am I supposed to just wait here, watching you get lost in the past all over again?" Ben's shoulders slumped, his voice a whisper. "I don't know what to say. I can't let this go, Karen. Can't. She stood up, her eyes flashing with a mixture of sadness and resignation. Then I guess I'll have to decide if I can keep waiting for you. With that, she left the room, leaving Ben alone with the ache of what felt like yet another loss. As Ben and Julie continued meeting, each visit seemed to uncover another layer of memories, a new connection between them. They shared laughs, small confidences, and stories of the past, his memories of Emily and her memories of growing up in a life that felt both familiar and foreign. One evening, as they strolled through the park, Julie turned to him, a thoughtful look in her eyes. I've always felt like there was something missing, a part of me that I couldn't find, no matter how hard I tried. Ben stopped, looking at her with understanding. I've felt the same way, ever since I lost you. She smiled, though her eyes were distant. I've always had this dream, of a swing set. I don't know why, but every time I close my eyes, I see it. A big oak tree with a swing attached to one of the branches. Ben's heart clenched. We had one just like that, in the backyard. You spent hours on it. You used to ask me to push you so high that you could reach the sky. Julie looked at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and wonder. Could it really be possible? That I'm your Emily? I don't know, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. But if there's even the slightest chance, I'll do whatever it takes to find out. The tentative hope between them grew stronger, a delicate thread of connection that neither of them could deny. The day they took the DNA test was filled with an almost unbearable tension. They met at the clinic, their expressions a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Ben's heart pounded as he sat beside her, holding her hand, both of them trying to ignore the weight of what this moment could mean. As they left the clinic, Julie looked at him, her face pale. What if it's not true? What if I'm not Emily? Ben's voice was soft, filled with quiet determination. Then I'll still be grateful for meeting you. But if it is true, we have a second chance, a chance to start over. They hugged before parting ways, each carrying the hope and fear of what the test results might reveal. The following days were filled with restlessness for both of them. Ben spent hours pacing, revisiting memories of Emily's childhood, wondering if he had missed some vital clue all those years ago. Each memory was both a comfort and a torment, a reminder of the life they had lost. Karen had been watching Ben's transformation with growing unease. She could feel him slipping away, his heart consumed by the possibility that he'd found his daughter. One evening, after yet another night of silence, she finally confronted him. Ben, we need to talk. This thing with Julie. It's taking over your life, she said, her voice filled with a mixture of frustration and sorrow. He looked at her, the weariness clear in his eyes. Karen, you know how much this means to me. If there's even a chance, she shook her head, her expression hardening. But what about us? Do we mean anything to you? He hesitated, torn between his love for Karen and his desire to find Emily. Karen, I love you, but I can't turn my back on this. If Julie is Emily, I need to know. I need to give her the life I promised her. She stared at him, her voice a whisper. And what about the life you promised me? Ben was silent, unable to answer. She took a shaky breath, her hands clenched at her sides. If you keep going down this path, Ben, I don't think I can stay. The words hung in the air, a painful ultimatum that forced Ben to confront the price of his quest. But as much as he cared for Karen, he knew he couldn't let this go. Not now, not when he was so close. When the results finally arrived, Ben felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with fear. He met Julie at the cafe where they'd shared so many tentative conversations, the envelope containing the results between them. Julie's hands shook as she picked up the envelope, glancing at him for reassurance. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. No matter what it says, we'll face it together. She nodded, taking a deep breath before tearing open the envelope. They both leaned forward, reading the results. The confirmation that she was, in fact, Emily, left them both breathless, a mixture of relief, disbelief, and joy overwhelming them. I'm really your daughter? She whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Ben's eyes filled with tears as he took her hand. Yes, Emily, you're my daughter. I knew it the moment I saw you. They embraced, the weight of 18 years of loss and longing melting away in that moment of reunion. It was a new beginning, a fragile thread of hope that connected their hearts. As she processed the reality of her identity, Emily decided to talk to her adoptive parents, Mary and Tom. She felt a mixture of love and guilt, knowing how much they had done for her, and yet yearning to know more about her biological family. The conversation was emotional, filled with tears and quiet understanding. Mary took her hand, her voice steady. "Emily, we knew there might come a day when you'd find your past. We want you to know we're proud of you, no matter what." Tom nodded, his expression somber. "You'll always be our daughter. But we understand that you need to find your roots." Emily hugged them both, grateful for the love and support they'd given her. She knew she had been blessed with two families, each filling a part of her heart. At home, Karen watched Ben and Emily's growing bond with a mixture of resignation and sorrow. She knew she had lost him, his heart and mind fully consumed by the daughter he'd found. One evening, Karen packed her bags, leaving a note for Ben. In it, she expressed her love for him, but also her need to move forward, to find a life where she wasn't constantly competing with the past. Ben read the note in silence, a bittersweet sadness filling him. He had loved Karen, but he knew that finding Emily had changed everything. It was a painful choice, but he also knew he couldn't turn his back on his daughter. With Karen gone, Ben and Emily poured themselves into rebuilding their relationship. They visited old family landmarks, sharing memories and creating new ones. Each moment was a step toward healing, a small bridge that connected their shared past to a hopeful future. One afternoon, Ben took Emily to the old playground where he had once pushed her on the swings. She looked at him, her eyes filled with wonder and recognition. "This is it, isn't it? The place I've dreamed about." He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Yes, you loved this place. You'd laugh so hard every time I pushed you, always begging me to go higher." They spent hours there, lost in memories and laughter, each swing bringing them closer to the family they'd both thought they'd lost forever. The weeks following the DNA test were a whirlwind of emotions for Ben and Emily. They found themselves both exhilarated and overwhelmed by the undeniable truth. Emily was Ben's daughter, and Ben, the father she had never remembered. Ben marveled at the ways she reminded him of Claire, her mother. Emily's laugh held the same spark, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. Even the little quirks, like her habit of tapping her fingers on the table when she was deep in thought. And yet she was also different. More reserved, more guarded, with a quiet resilience that spoke to the life she had built without him. One afternoon, as they sat in a cozy corner of Ben's favorite cafe, Emily glanced at him over her coffee cup. "It's strange," she said softly. "I feel like I know you, and yet there's so much I don't." Ben nodded, understanding the tension in her voice. "I feel the same way. I look at you, and I see glimpses of the little girl you were, and then I see the young woman you've become. It's both familiar and completely new." They exchanged a tentative smile, the beginnings of a new understanding dawning between them. They were navigating unfamiliar terrain, balancing memories with present realities, but both knew they were ready to build a life together, one step at a time. As they spent more time together, Emily grew increasingly curious about her mother, Claire. She felt the loss acutely, a sense of missing someone she never had the chance to know. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Ben's house, Emily asked, "Can you tell me more about her? About Mom?" Ben's eyes softened, a mix of joy and sorrow flickering across his face. "She was incredible. She had this warmth, this strength that everyone admired. She loved life and loved you so much. Losing her was like losing the sun." Emily leaned in, her gaze intent. What was her favorite thing to do? Ben laughed softly, memories washing over him. Dancing. She loved to dance, even if it was just in our living room. She'd pull me up and we'd dance to old records, usually after putting you to bed. Sometimes you'd sneak back out and watch us. It made her so happy to see you laugh. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of happiness and sorrow. "I wish I remembered that." Ben reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "She lives in you, Emily. You carry her spirit, her love, even if you don't remember it." For the first time, Emily felt a connection to the mother she'd lost, and it comforted her in ways she hadn't anticipated. In the spirit of creating new memories, Ben and Emily decided to establish a few traditions of their own. They cooked dinners together, shared their favorite movies, and spent quiet evenings talking about everything from books to dreams for the future. One evening, Ben surprised her with a scrapbook he had kept over the years, a collection of newspaper clippings, missing persons flyers, even letters he'd written but never sent. "I never stopped searching for you," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You were never forgotten." Emily ran her fingers over the worn pages, each item a testament to her father's love. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. Ben wrapped her in a hug, their bond growing stronger with each shared moment. They didn't need the memories of the past. They were building a future, one filled with love, trust, and a newfound sense of family. Despite her deepening connection with Ben, Emily knew she couldn't ignore the parents who had raised her. She felt an immense gratitude toward Mary and Tom, who had provided her with love and stability in the years she couldn't remember her past. They arranged a weekend visit, and Ben accompanied her, feeling both gratitude and trepidation. Mary and Tom welcomed them warmly, although there was an unspoken tension in the air, a sense that Emily was bridging two worlds. Over dinner, Tom raised a glass, his voice filled with pride and warmth. "We're glad you found each other. Emily has always been strong, and I think she gets that from both of you." Mary, too, offered her blessing. "She's always been our little miracle, and we're so grateful to have been part of her life. But I know she's found something special with you, Ben. Family." Emily's heart swelled with love for all three parents who had shaped her life. As she hugged Mary and Tom goodbye, she felt an unbreakable bond with them. Grateful to know she could carry both her adoptive and biological families in her heart. The visit allowed Emily to fully embrace her dual identity. She wasn't just the little girl who had disappeared or the young woman who had been found. She was both, and that gave her strength. As a way to connect with her past, Emily and Ben decided to visit the old family home where she had spent the first years of her life. The house had been vacant since Claire's passing, a painful reminder of the life Ben had lost. The sight of the house struck Ben with a wave of nostalgia and sorrow. The paint was peeling, the garden overgrown, but he could still picture the life they'd had there. "This was where everything happened," he murmured, his voice filled with a mixture of reverence and grief. Inside they found remnants of their past. A faded swing set in the backyard, Emily's old room filled with toys and posters. She wandered the rooms, memories surfacing as if through a thick fog. "I remember this," she said softly, her fingers brushing against the dusty bookshelf. "I used to read here. Mom would sit beside me and listen." Ben watched her, his heart swelling with pride and love. "You were her whole world, Emily, and now you're mine." The visit was both painful and cathartic, helping Emily piece together fragments of her childhood and giving Ben a sense of closure as he shared these memories with his daughter. Ben had kept in touch with a few close friends who had supported him during the years he'd searched for Emily. He invited one of these friends, Jim, a retired detective who had worked on Emily's case, to join them for dinner. Jim had always believed that Ben would find Emily one day, and seeing them together brought tears to his eyes. "You never gave up," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "I've seen too many parents lose hope, but not you." Emily listened to their stories, learning about her father's relentless pursuit, the sacrifices he had made, and the life he had built around the hope of finding her. She realized that his love had carried him through the darkest of times. After dinner, Jim pulled Ben aside. "She's a strong one, just like her mother." "You did good, Ben. She's lucky to have you back." Ben smiled, his heart full. "I'm the lucky one, Jim. I just want to give her the life she deserves." Jim's words solidified for Emily the strength of her father's love, and she felt a deeper gratitude for the family she had been given, both old and new. Months after Karen had left, Ben received a letter from her. She had moved to a small town and was trying to rebuild her life. In her letter, she expressed her lingering love for Ben, but acknowledged that their marriage was over. Karen wrote, "I made mistakes, and I know I hurt you, but I hope you can forgive me someday. I wish you and Emily all the happiness you deserve. Maybe someday we can find peace." Ben read the letter in silence, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. He had loved Karen, and part of him always would, but he knew that their paths had diverged. He was grateful for her support during those years, but now he could focus on building a future with his daughter. The letter brought closure, allowing him to finally let go of the past and embrace the life he was rebuilding with Emily. With a renewed sense of family, Ben and Emily decided to visit Claire's grave. The day was clear, with a gentle breeze rustling through the trees as they approached the small headstone that bore her name. Ben knelt beside the grave, his voice choked with emotion. "Claire, I finally found her. I know you'd be proud." Emily placed a bouquet of her mother's favorite flowers on the grave, her hand resting gently on the stone. "Thank you for everything, Mom. I may not remember you, but I feel your love." They stood in silence, each lost in memories and gratitude, feeling the presence of Claire's love as they honored her together. The visit allowed both of them to feel connected to Claire, finding peace in the knowledge that she would always be a part of them. As the weeks turned to months, Emily grew more comfortable with her identity, learning to balance her past and present. She legally changed her last name to Caldwell, a decision that reflected her choice to embrace her biological family. Mary and Tom supported her decision, recognizing that Emily's journey was one of self-discovery and acceptance. Emily felt a sense of completeness, knowing she didn't have to choose one family over the other. She was a part of both. Ben, too, felt a profound sense of joy, seeing his daughter claim her place in his life and legacy. "You're my daughter, Emily Caldwell," he said proudly, wrapping her in a hug. "And I'm so proud of the woman you've become." Her new identity brought her confidence, allowing her to live fully in the present while honoring her roots. With their relationship solidified, Ben and Emily began to plan a future that blended their lives, full of new traditions, shared memories, and dreams for the future. They traveled together, celebrated holidays, and spent quiet evenings reminiscing and looking ahead. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Emily turned to him, a soft smile on her face. "Thank you for finding me, Dad, for never giving up." Ben's voice was filled with gratitude as he replied, "You were worth every moment, Emily. You always will be." Their journey had been one of pain and loss, but in finding each other, they discovered a love that transcended time and memory. They were no longer defined by what they had lost, but by the life they were building together. Despite the peace Emily and Ben had found in reconnecting, questions about her past still lingered. Emily felt a gnawing curiosity about the years she couldn't remember, the pieces of her life that remained obscured. One evening, Emily expressed her feelings to Ben. "I know I'm finally where I belong, but there's still this part of me that feels unsettled. I want to know what really happened, to understand why I was taken from you." Ben reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I understand, Emily. We've come so far, but if knowing the truth will help, I'll be there every step of the way." Together, they decided to reach out to Jim, the retired detective who had helped them before, hoping he could uncover the final pieces of Emily's past. Jim dug deep into the old case files, his years of experience guiding him through layers of red tape and forgotten paperwork. After several weeks, he called Ben and Emily to his office, a look of quiet intensity in his eyes. "Ben, Emily," he said, gesturing for them to sit. "I've found someone who may hold answers. His name is David Hale, a lawyer who was involved in several questionable adoption cases around the time Emily disappeared. He had a reputation for bending the law, hiding identities, making things disappear. It's possible he was part of whatever happened to you, Emily." Emily's heart pounded at the name, her mind racing with possibilities. Ben's jaw tightened, a mixture of anger and determination in his gaze. "Where is he now?" Jim nodded, pulling out a file. "He's in New York, still practicing law under a slightly different name. If you're ready, I can arrange a meeting." Emily felt a surge of emotions, fear, anticipation, even hope. "I need to do this," she said firmly. "I need to know what he knows." With Jim's help, they arranged a meeting with Hale, each of them bracing for the answers they were about to face. The meeting was set in a quiet, nondescript office in the city. Ben and Emily sat side by side, the weight of their shared history giving them strength as they prepared to face the man who might have the answers they needed. David Hale entered the room, a tall man with sharp features and an air of detachment. He looked at them both, his gaze flickering with a hint of recognition before he sat down, his posture relaxed. Ben wasted no time. "Mr. Hale, you were involved in the adoption of a young girl nearly 20 years ago, a girl named Emily Caldwell. We believe you played a role in hiding her identity. We want to know why." Hale's expression remained impassive, though there was a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. "I don't recall every case I've handled. I did what I was paid to do, nothing more." Emily leaned forward, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm that girl, and I deserve to know what happened. Why did you hide me from my family?" Hale sighed, his demeanor shifting slightly. "Look, I won't deny that I handled your case. But as for why, that's on the people who paid me. I just made sure you disappeared, that you were placed with a family where you'd be untraceable." Ben's anger simmered beneath the surface, but he kept his voice controlled. "Who paid you, Hale?" Hale looked away, his jaw tightening. "It was a woman, said she had her reasons, wanted to make sure the girl was out of sight. I didn't ask questions." The truth hit Emily like a wave. Karen, her father's second wife, the woman who had shared her father's life after she disappeared. She'd harbored secrets that could have destroyed them all. The realization left Emily reeling, a mix of betrayal and anger churning within her. The revelation cast a long shadow over the room, one that felt both painful and oddly clarifying. Emily's past, once obscured, was now coming into sharp focus. After leaving the meeting, Ben and Emily walked in silence, the city's noise filling the spaces between them as they processed what they had learned. Emily stopped, looking up at him, her eyes filled with hurt. "Dad, why would she do this? How could someone take me from you? From everything?" Ben's voice trembled with sorrow and guilt. "I don't know, Emily. But whatever her reasons, she made a choice that took you from me, from us, and nothing can justify that." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I want to feel anger, but all I feel is sadness. Sadness for the life I didn't get to have, the memories I never made." Ben reached out, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We can't change the past, but we have each other now, and we'll build new memories, create a new life together." They stood there for a long moment, each finding solace in the other, as they released the weight of the secrets that had shaped them. In the weeks that followed, Emily began to take steps to reclaim her life. She filed to change her legal name back to Caldwell, honoring the family she had lost and the father who had never stopped searching for her. The day she signed the documents, Ben stood beside her, his pride evident in his smile. "Welcome home, Emily Caldwell," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled, feeling a sense of completeness she hadn't felt before. "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for never giving up on me, even when you thought all hope was lost." Ben's heart swelled with gratitude and love. "I'd do it all again, Emily, every second of it." With her new identity, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose and strength, ready to face whatever the future held. With her past now uncovered, Emily began the work of building a new future with Ben. They spent weekends hiking, cooking, and creating new traditions that honored their bond. Ben encouraged her to pursue her passions, supporting her in ways that reflected his unwavering love. One afternoon, they sat on the back porch, looking out over the quiet landscape. Emily turned to him, her expression soft. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if things had been different?" Ben nodded, his gaze distant. "Every day, but I also believe that everything led us here, to this moment, and for that I'm grateful." Emily smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Me too." Their relationship was one of resilience, a quiet strength built from years of longing and the love they had finally reclaimed. As she found peace in her life with Ben, Emily decided to write a letter to Karen. Though the pain of her betrayal lingered, Emily felt a need to release the resentment, to free herself from the shadow of Karen's choices. In her letter, Emily wrote, "I don't know why you did what you did, and I may never understand it. But I want you to know that I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I do. I'm choosing to let go of the anger, to embrace the love I have now. I hope you find peace too." Ben read the letter with a mixture of sadness and admiration. "You're stronger than you know, Emily. I'm so proud of you." She nodded, a sense of relief washing over her. "I needed to let it go. to finally be free. The letter marked a turning point, allowing Emily to move forward unburdened by the past, embracing the life she and Ben were building together. One final step toward closure remained: honoring Claire, the mother Emily had never fully known. They decided to hold a small ceremony at Claire's graveside, a tribute to the love that had shaped them both. Ben spoke softly, his voice filled with reverence. "Claire, I wish you could see her. See the incredible young woman she's become. She's every bit as wonderful as you knew she'd be." Emily placed a single white rose on the grave, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you for giving me life, for loving me, even if I can't remember. I carry you with me, always." They stood together, the weight of their loss mingling with the beauty of the life they had reclaimed. In that moment, they felt Claire's presence, a quiet warmth that surrounded them as they said goodbye. In the months that followed, Ben and Emily fully embraced the new life they were creating. They continued to visit places from her past, blending old memories with new experiences, each one a testament to their resilience and the unbreakable bond they shared. Emily began working toward her own dreams, with Ben as her biggest supporter. She pursued her career, built friendships, and explored her identity with a newfound confidence. Ben, too, found peace, knowing that the family he had lost was finally restored. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Emily turned to him, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Thank you for everything, Dad. For finding me, for fighting for me." Ben's voice was choked with emotion as he replied, "Thank you for coming back to me, Emily. You're my miracle." Their journey, though filled with pain, had ultimately become a story of love, resilience, and healing. They had lost time, but they had each other, and as they looked toward the future, they knew they were finally, truly home. Years later, during a family gathering, Emily looked around at the people she loved. Ben, her adoptive parents, and her closest friends surrounded her, their faces filled with joy and pride. The past, once shrouded in pain and mystery, was now a cherished memory that had led her to this moment. Ben approached her, his eyes twinkling with pride. "You did it, Emily. You built the life we both dreamed of." Emily hugged him, her heart full. "We did it, Dad. Together." As they stood side by side, the future stretched before them, filled with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. Their story was no longer one of loss, but of a love reclaimed, a testament to the strength of family and the beauty of finding one's way home. The seasons changed, years passing as Ben and Emily continued to weave their lives together, their days filled with small joys, quiet moments, and celebrations of everything they had reclaimed. They weren't a typical family, but they had found a rhythm, a cadence that made their relationship feel both grounding and new. In the early years after they reconnected, Ben often caught himself marveling at the presence of his daughter by his side. Emily was a blend of her mother's grace and her father's stubborn will. Her laughter, once a distant memory, now echoed through his home, filling every corner with a sense of warmth and peace he'd thought lost forever. One sunny afternoon, family and friends gathered at Ben's home for a milestone celebration in Emily's life. She had recently been promoted in her career, her hard work and dedication recognized by her colleagues. The living room was filled with the familiar faces of those who had walked beside her and Ben through the years, from her adoptive parents, Mary and Tom, to Jim, the retired detective who had helped them uncover the truth. Ben raised a glass, his voice thick with pride as he spoke to the room. "To my daughter Emily," he began, his gaze holding hers. "You have faced every challenge life has thrown at you with grace and strength. You're an inspiration, and I am beyond proud of the woman you've become." Emily's eyes glistened as she looked at him, the love and pride in his words filling her heart. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." As glasses clinked and laughter filled the room, Emily felt a profound sense of belonging. She looked around at the faces that had become her family, her heart full with gratitude for the journey that had led her here. Each year, Ben and Emily visited Claire's grave, honoring her memory with quiet moments of reflection. They brought flowers, shared memories, and held each other close, finding comfort in the knowledge that Claire's love was a part of them both. One particularly cold winter morning, they stood together by her headstone, bundled in coats and scarves. Ben knelt beside the grave, placing a bouquet of white roses, Claire's favorite. "She would be so proud of you, Emily," he said softly, "and she would have loved you more than words could ever say." Emily knelt beside him, resting her hand on his. "I think I feel her sometimes, in the little things. The way the sunlight filters through the trees, or when I laugh about something silly." She smiled, her voice a whisper. "It feels like she's still with us." Ben wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "She is, through you, through me. And as long as we remember her, she'll always be a part of our lives." Their yearly visits to Claire became a tradition, a sacred time to honor her presence and to express their gratitude for the family she had helped to create. As the years went by, Emily continued to make strides in her career, often consulting Ben, who had become her confidant and greatest supporter. They spent evenings talking about her dreams, discussing her goals, and finding ways to give back to the community. One summer, they decided to start a foundation in Claire's name, dedicated to supporting children who had been separated from their families or who had experienced loss. The Claire Caldwell Foundation became a pillar of hope, offering counseling, resources, and education for families in need. At the foundation's opening ceremony, Emily addressed the small crowd, her voice steady and filled with purpose. "This foundation is for every child who's ever felt lost, for every family who's searched for answers. It's a tribute to my mother's memory, and a promise that we will always strive to help others find their way home." Ben watched from the audience, his heart swelling with pride. He knew that this foundation would be Claire's legacy, a testament to the love that had sustained their family through years of darkness and pain. The foundation brought both Ben and Emily a sense of purpose, a way to honor the past while building a brighter future for others. As time passed, Emily began creating family traditions of her own, incorporating the love she'd received from both her adoptive and biological parents. Every holiday, she hosted a dinner, inviting her whole family, Mary and Tom, Ben, and their closest friends. One Christmas Eve, as they gathered around the table, Mary raised her glass, her voice trembling with emotion. "To our Emily, we may not have shared the same blood, but you have been a gift in every way. Thank you for filling our lives with joy." Emily hugged her mother tightly, her heart full. She turned to Ben, smiling as she took his hand. "And thank you, Dad, for never giving up on me, for bringing me back to where I belong." They spent the evening sharing stories, laughter, and love, each one a reminder of the family they had created through resilience and forgiveness. In the quiet moments of their lives, Ben and Emily found joy in the simple things: long hikes in the mountains, lazy afternoons with books, and moments of laughter over shared memories. They spoke openly about the years they had lost, but instead of dwelling on the pain, they chose to celebrate the time they had reclaimed. One warm spring day, as they walked through the park, Ben turned to Emily, his face softened by a smile. "I never thought I'd get to do this again," he said, watching her with a look of contentment. "Just walking with you, talking like this. It's more than I ever dreamed." Emily wrapped her arm around his, her gaze gentle. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Ben nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Yes, and I wouldn't trade a single moment of it." They walked in silence, each step a testament to the love that had carried them through darkness and into the light. Years later, after Ben had passed, Emily stood before a gathering of family and friends at his memorial, her heart filled with both sorrow and gratitude. She felt his presence, a steady warmth that reassured her even in his absence. With tears in her eyes and a steady voice, she spoke to the room. "My father was the most resilient man I've ever known. He spent years searching for me, never once giving up hope. He taught me what it means to love unconditionally, to persevere in the face of heartache, and to forgive even when it seems impossible." She paused, her gaze soft. "He taught me that family is not just a matter of blood, but of choice, of the bonds we create through love, loyalty, and resilience. I am who I am because of him, and I will carry his love with me always." Emily continued her father's work with the foundation, dedicating her life to helping others find the peace that she and Ben had fought so hard to achieve. She lived with a heart full of gratitude, honoring his memory with every step. In the quiet moments, she would often find herself gazing at the stars, feeling the presence of both her parents guiding her, their love a steady light in the darkness. And in those moments, she would smile, knowing that she was never truly alone. Her journey with Ben, their love and their resilience had become a legacy. A story of redemption, family, and the unbreakable power of love. Together, in spirit and in memory, Ben and Emily had created a life defined not by what they had lost, but by what they had reclaimed. And as Emily moved forward, she carried their legacy with her, forever bound by the love that had brought them back to each other. As we leave Ben and Emily's story, we're reminded of the resilience love can bring, even in life's darkest moments. If you've been moved by this journey of family, redemption, and the power of forgiveness, be sure to subscribe for more stories that celebrate the strength of the human spirit. Join us as we explore tales of hope, heart, and resilience, because sometimes love is the greatest story we can share.